Hey everybody, it's Mitch and welcome to my next video. Today we are going to be doing another Dungeons & Dragons video, and today we are going to be taking a look at the differences between spellcasting and psionics, because they're different. So let's look into this a little bit. So spellcasting is something I've done a few videos on already, something that's fairly well known. And psionics is something I've been doing some videos on various psionic races and classes lately, and I'm probably going to start doing some prestige classes after this. So I figured this would be a good time to talk about this, since I'm really since I'm like halfway into covering the expanded psionics handbook right now. So yeah, let's talk about it. Okay, so psionics. Well, as opposed to spellcasting, well, let's look at spellcasting for a sec. So spellcasting, normally when you cast a spell, you have your various spell levels. You have 0 through 9th level spells. Then you can get into Epic too, but that's a whole other thing. We're not even going to worry about that for now. Then once you've cast those, and then you have like so many 0 level spells prepared, so many first, so many second, so many third, or maybe you don't prepare them, but even then you still have so many 0 level spell slots, so many first level spell slots, so many third level spell slots. I think I skipped second. You have second as well, and then fourth and fifth. You get the point. So you have all that. You don't have that with psionics. Now there are for zero, actually I don't think there are 0 level powers, but there are first level powers, second level powers, third level powers, up to 9th level powers. That's a thing for sure. But you don't have spell slots, or you don't have power slots. That's not a thing. How it works is you have what's known as power points. So basically, you have your entire manifesting capacity all in one big jar, whereas with spellcasting, you have like a bunch of different jars for the different levels. Now you can mix and match those to some extent. Typically, like you can use a higher level spell slot for a lower level spell with no penalty, other than the fact that you're wasting a better resource. So that works, but there's also feats that you can take where you actually do get benefit. But then there's feats. Meta Magic Empower, for instance, is one that you could always just use. Like if you happen to have the Meta Magic Empower feat, which isn't the best of feats in the world, but if you have it, you could always use it. Just as sort of I'm out of 4th level spell slots, but I'd like to cast this 4th level spell. Guess I'll use a 5th level spell slot. Might as well empower it, because it's a waste not to at that point. So, I mean, there's that. But anyways, that's a little bit off the point. So, with this, so yeah, you have your little jars. But with psionics, you don't. You have just one big pool of points, and all those points are available for any sort of power. So that's kind of nice. It gives a level of flexibility and that you don't get from spellcasting. Spellcasting, it is somewhat rigid based on that. And another thing with spellcasting is I'm talking about both arcane and divine. There are major differences. I have videos on that. Definitely check those out. Or I have one video on that, but I do have a video on that, so check that out. But for this, I'm combining both arcane and divine, although I'm looking a little more at the arcane. But so far, everything I've said applies to both. So you have that. Then, and the main reason I'm doing it more with arcane is it's more similar. The classes seem to be, the psionic classes seem to be based off the wizard, the sorcerer, and seems like the Duskblade with the Psychic Warrior. So yeah. Anyways, let's talk. So yeah. Okay. So another thing with psionics, with spells, is with spells you have casting components. You've got material components. So sometimes you have to have some sort of object that gets consumed when casting the spell. Now there's also somatic components, which means you have to speak words. You have your magical words that you have to say correctly in order to make the spell happen. Now there's also, oh sorry, that's not somatic. Those are verbal components. Somatic is motion. I don't know why I was thinking that. I think it's because somatic's a weird word. Anyways, so somatic components is your motion components. Those are the components of motion. Like you have to make certain hand gestures or whatever it happens to be. Usually it's going to be some kind of hand gesture, like maybe some like Naruto signs or something. I don't know. I don't know what it is, but there's going to be some sort of complex movement that you're going to have to make, which is why somatic components will mess with armor, at least for arcane. Divine doesn't require that level of precision. But anyways, you don't have that with psionics. And you have verbal components, which is the component you say. Sometimes you have experience components. That one actually does sometimes apply to psionics. That one's the one exception. And then you also could potentially have an arcane focus or a spell focus. That one's a little different. That's just something you need to have on your possession in order to cast spells. You'll see some of that with like druids and clerics needing their holy symbols or their what is it, holly and mistletoe, I think, for druids. So you might need those. Some other ones require other things. So these are just things that you need to have on you. They are not consumed. Now, as for psionics, they have something else. They have what's known as displays. And the displays are things that are very, very different. So with your material, with your components, you know, if you don't have that material, you can't cast a spell for the material component. With the somatic component, if you're in armor and you're doing, you know, some sort of spell with a somatic component, there's going to be a failure rate associated with that if you're an arcane caster. Also, if you're bound, like if someone's grappling you or if you're tied up, you can't use somatic. You can't do somatic components because you can't move your arms in the ways that are required to do the spell. So those are going to be off limits to you. Now, if you are in a situation where you are in like a zone of silence, you can't use verbal components because you can't speak. If you're underwater, again, you can't use verbal components because you can't speak because you're underwater and you would drown if you tried to do that. So that's actually a trap some spellcasters fall into. They fall underwater and then they think, oh, I'll just cast a spell to get out of this. And nope, it doesn't work like that. They're in trouble, actually, unless they prepared ahead of time with a number of ways that a spellcaster could be prepared for that. But if they didn't do any of them, then they're in serious trouble. But a psionic character wouldn't have to worry about that because they don't have these things. They have their displays, like I said. So, or another thing with verbal ones is if you're doing a stealth mission, if you try and cast a spell with a verbal component, your opponents are going to be able to make listen checks to hear you. You know, it's going to make it harder to be stealthy because you're talking, you know. So that's kind of a problem there. And probably fairly easy ones because it's going to be really hard to muffle your words without messing up the spell, especially if you're doing an arcane one. So yeah. Then, but as I was saying, psionics doesn't have this issue. Psionics, with their displays, some of them they make it so like it'll like you'll hear it in your head. If you're hit by it, there'll be like some sort of ringing sound or something, but which could also have that stealth issue. But it's not going to prevent them from casting it. They also could potentially have one where like an ectoplasm covers everything. Okay, that's weird. It doesn't really have any effect, but now things are just covered in ectoplasm for a few turns. That's going to kind of give away some things, and people are going to realize something's up. So the psionic displays can mess with a stealth mission, sure, but probably not to the extent a lot of spells would. And also, it's not going to mess with anything else. Like you can still use your powers just fine. The displays are just going to be things that manifest in the world. A lot of it's fluff, but it will manifest. It could mess with a stealth mission. It really could. If you're trying to, be stealthy, those displays could give you away. So that's a thing. There's various different ones. There are experience costs sometimes. Those are the same with spells. But again, those are just typically for both spellcasting and psionics. The most powerful stuff have that usually. The really, really good stuff that is either going to have major advantages in combat, somewhat game-breaking advantages in combat. Those will have experience costs with them. You know, your high-level ninth spells like Wish, Miracle, Reality Revision. Experience, they are broken spells. For if you were to cast them in combat, they can do some really tide-shifting things, but they have experience costs, and they even out of combat they have some really tide-shifting things. But again, experience costs, which is a little bit different, but it can have an experience cost as well. Although that one's more likely to just go against you. But Reality Revision very much has an experience cost. So things like that, and then things like permanency with spells. So things that have a lot of utility to them tend to be the ones that are expensive, that have the expensive experience cost. So that's kind of a thing. Now, in terms of other things with the game, differences between them, well, the total pool of psionic power that a psionic character has is typically going to be less than that of a spellcaster in general. So a spellcaster is going to be able to use more spells more easily. They're not going to have to worry as much about resource management. So that's another thing that's you're really going to have to watch out for. And I'm going to go into that a little bit more, but first I want to talk about one of the main reasons why that's the case, and that is scaling. So a first level spell a lot of them, especially the blasting spells, scale as you get higher level, like Magic Missile. As you get higher level, your Magic Missile, you just get more Magic Missiles. Same with Fireball. It just gets to be a stronger Fireball as you level up. Like when you first get it at 5th level, it's doing 5d6 damage. Okay, that's nice. But by 10th level, it's capped out at 10d6. And you didn't do anything to do that. You just leveled up 5 more times. You expended no resources getting that other than just leveling up. And you got a million other things for that too. So that's kind of big. And that's true with a lot of spells. Almost all the blasting spells have that. I know those aren't the best options, but they're good options in the right situations. It's good to have at least a few of them around, at least. And they scale. So yeah, there's also other spells that will scale, like durations will go up and various other things. This is all really important. And range and everything. Now, duration and range, I believe, do actually increase with level for psionic characters typically as well. But the other things, like the other variable effects, they do and they don't. They will, but only if you augment them. But by augmenting them, you're effectively not making them a lower level power anymore. So if you augment a first level blasting spell to its fullest when you're 20th level, it's basically a 9th level power. Like, you're using the same resources you would for a 9th level power. It's going to have roughly the same power as a 9th level power at that point as well. Maybe not quite as strong, but it'll at least be, close to the same level, which is not something you can say for spellcasting. But you're using the higher level resource to do it. Like, the amount of resources it takes to do a fully augmented power is the same regardless of level of the power. So yeah, the only real difference is the lower level ones, when not augmented, take way less power points. The amount of power points they're going to take is actually equal to the lowest possible level that power can be cast at typically, at least that the developers expected it to be cast at. There's probably exceptions out there, but the devs definitely intended for that to be the case. But I'm sure some of you guys out there probably found ways to break that. So yeah, I know how crazy some people have gotten with that. But yeah, that's the difference between that's one major difference: spells will scale with level for free. Like when a 20th level caster casts Magic Missile or Fireball, which those cap way before 20th level, but still. Actually, yeah, I'm pretty sure they both do. They're not going to be, but they're not using any more resources than they did when they were first level. The spell just got better because they are stronger. That simple. So they're using still a first level resource, which is a low level resource that they have a number of slots for, and they're not going to be using. They're not going to be worried about too much. They're going to be more worried about saving their higher level resources because they have a lot of low level resources. Let's be real. The total number of spells that 20th level caster has is quite large. So especially if they've been investing in magic items to augment that. So yeah. So yeah, and some of the spells augment in other ways, like Kelp Strand for the Druid. Holy crap, does that not augment? It scales really well in some obvious ways and some more subtle ways as well. Like you get to add your casting stat to it, which that you may not notice that as being scaling, but as you level up, you're probably increasing that stat. So that will actually scale in that regard too, probably. Not necessarily. Maybe you're not upping that stat, but I don't know why you wouldn't. Anyway, so you have all these things, whereas you just don't have that with psionics. Maybe some of that stuff, like I was saying with Kelp Strand, with the having your casting stat go up, might buff some of them more. Okay, sure. That's rare with spellcasting, and I'm sure it happens with psionics as well. Okay, fine. But things where it's just like gets more, like it just goes up by 1 every level, like that's crazy. Which is kind of what happens with Kelp Strand. It's really, that one's so broken. Also, you get more strands as you level up, so it scales in multiple ways, and it's really good. But anyways, so yeah, you see all these. So there's some major differences. The fact that I would say that first level, early level powers are better in the short run for psionic characters because they can augment them, and a fully augmented first level power is going to be stronger than a first level spell, no doubt, like way more powerful, because the way they augment just goes way past what things would be capped for a first level spell. But it's using the resources of a 9th level power when you're doing that. So makes sense that it'd be better because it's using a higher level resource to do it. One of the advantages with that is a lot of the psionic classes don't have very large pools to go from. Like they don't have a lot of powers known, particularly the wilder. So being able to make good use out of all of them, like making like even your low level powers still viable at high levels, is good, but you're still using a higher level resource. So it's catch-22 in a lot of ways. In terms of who can get the most, who can be really effective in combat in the early rounds, I think the psionic characters take the cake on that one. I think psionic characters are stronger than spellcasters in general in the first few rounds, just because they have more, they're able to blast their powers out a lot quicker and really get all that psionic energy out and do real damage fast. Whereas spellcasters, they tend to take longer to get that out. So they are going to be a little weaker, I think, in combat, at least in the early rounds. But once that psionic character is spent, which won't take too terribly long, especially with some of the really broken things that psionic characters can do, they can be way more powerful in the early rounds if they start doing that. But expend all their resources within a few turns if they do that. And I mean, they'll be devastating and just destroy whatever they're fighting probably, but they're going to be helpless for the rest of the day after that. There are ways to get power points back, sure, just like there's ways to get spells back, pearls of power, but still, yeah, whereas a spellcaster, they can't really unleash that much magical energy all at once, but they don't burn out as quick. Even without the crazy gimmicky stuff, they're still not, they're going to last longer. They're going to be able to conserve resources, and they're going to be able to go for the long haul if you're going through a long dungeon grind. The psionic character is going to struggle to be relevant for the entire time. If you're going for a quick one-shot boss fight, psionic character is probably going to prove to be more useful in that. But if you're going for a long dungeon grind, I think the spellcaster is better for sure, because they're just going to be able to maintain relevancy throughout the entire dungeon much better than the psionic character will. Now, a martial character would be even better at that because they can swing their sword all day, but that's a whole other story, and in all honesty, martial characters are fairly weak in general. Not always the case, but more often than not, they're weaker than casters or manifestors and all that. So, yeah. But that's mostly all I have to say with the differences between psionics and magic. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you guys. If you enjoyed the video, consider giving it a like and subscribe to the channel for more awesome videos. Oh, plus ring that bell because YouTube's terrible about giving notifications. But anyways, as always, I'm Mitch. I'll be seeing you.